So thank you for attending this afternoon. Thank you for joining us to talk about OCRE. Just a quick note from the GÉANT Partner Relations team and the community program. These InfoShares do happen on Wednesday, and they are recorded, and they will be distributed through the eAcademy, the GLAD website, and on wiki pages. So you can actually reference these. We're going to be talking about OCRE today, and many of you know me, Dave Haynes. I am the head of cloud services at GÉANT. I'm also the project director on behalf of the European Commission, and I'm joined by my colleague Jakob Tendel from DFN. Jakob is responsible for the NREN liaison between the NRENs and the OCRE project, and Jakob also participates in the GÉANT project, Work Package 4, and the GÉANT Contract Management Group. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the OCRE project, where it came from, how we got this far, and where we're at. And then Jakob will be talking a little bit about how the OCRE project and the GÉANT community intends supporting the NRENs and the institutes in terms of the procurement and consumption of these services. So OCRE is a European funded project. It is part of the European Open Science Cloud. The EC intended through the OCRE project to provide the European R&E community with access to commercial cloud and digital services through a series of procurements. GÉANT intended to replace the GÉANT 2016 IaaS framework contracts, which expired at the end of 2020, through the OCRE IaaS Plus framework. And then OCRE also intends driving the adoption of such services and stimulating the European digital economy by a series of research funding waves, which I will mention, but we are mainly focusing on the cloud framework today. So why cloud services? If you look on the right-hand side at the deployment model, you'll see that GÉANT is eligible to procure in all 40 countries, that they support the NRENs, who are each eligible to procure in their own country, who in turn support the institutes, the universities, the research institutes, who are also listed as eligible to procure in the various countries. We have 39 NRENs participating. We did have a number of institutes step forward in one of the countries where the NREN is not participating. So we procured in 40 countries, and we reach about 10,000 institutes in doing this. If we look at why cloud services, our world changed a year ago. We all went home, and we all went home to work, to teach, to learn, to engage with our research activities. And this was all made possible, and only made possible, by cloud-based services. If we look at cloud services, typical cloud services, we see the compute, hyperscale compute, and data storage. So these are classic consumable commodity commercial services. And we see these across all the platforms, and I'll show you the extent to which we have platforms in each of the countries shortly. But we have these across all of the platforms in the country. So there's a lot of choice in terms of commodity cloud services and distributing your data center resources out onto the public cloud for your institutes. But then we also look at HPC, and I saw on LinkedIn yesterday that the University of Sussex is shifting their HPC services onto Azure, and they're shutting down their own HPC center because the current bandwidth that the networks are facilitating and the compute capabilities on a hyperscale platform easily replace having to put your workload in line for consuming a local HPC center. So HPC is a really good case study, and the size of the GPU and CPU capability on these hyperscale platforms is phenomenal. We look at the hyperscale marketplaces. So I've just come off a really interesting webinar focused purely on OCRE by Microsoft. And these are really, really worth attending. If you go onto aka.ms/OCRE, you'll see the upcoming webinars, and today's was available. It was an introduction to OCRE, but it was available as a recording, but not to focus on any one supplier. But it's really interesting to see what services are available through the OCRE framework to the education and research community in Europe. And that these hyperscale marketplaces offer services that are the intellectual property of the platform, but they could be, for example, a machine learning platform, various software as a service offerings, platform as a service offerings. There's a lot that is being offered through the framework. So do yourselves a favor and go onto one of the marketplaces and just have a look and see exactly what is being offered to your institutes, because there is a lot, and it's really impressive. As I said, analytics platforms that support machine learning, artificial intelligence, the abstraction of information from your connected devices on your campuses and in your institutes. A lot of that is abstracted through cloud technologies into cloud workplaces for consumption. Solution hosting, so any of the solutions that might have been hosted on premise at a university or an institute can now be easily deployed onto a public cloud platform, and through containerization, Kubernetes, those kinds of solutions, these can be easily virtualized in an on-premise data center and shifted to the cloud without your constituents even being aware of where this is hosted. Backup as a service has been an early adoption cloud workload, but obviously we have come a long way since then. And then solutions like cold storage. So we met with the Japanese NREN recently, and they spoke about their use of cold storage for workloads, data storage, essentially, that doesn't have to be immediately available, that can come online within 36 to 48 hours, depending on the platform. And this is a really good opportunity for us to make our research data reusable by the researchers. Obviously, a key component of FAIR data is the metadata, but platforms like Microsoft, and they were talking about a product called Purview, which they are hoping to preview shortly, which helps you automatically through NoSQL and semantic searches identify and standardize the metadata that describes your FAIR data kind of workload. And that metadata would obviously need to be online constantly in order for the research institutes to find it. But the actual data, the actual research data, the bits and bytes, could be bought online within 36 to 48 hours. And the cost of hosting data in this way on cold storage is literally pennies. I mean, it's fractional. It's a very, very small cost for huge data sets. If we look at the kind of workloads used by academia, video conferencing, as I said, COVID-19 last year, really the institutes had to work in a very agile way to get all of their classes and lectures online. But they were probably already facilitating massive open content lectures. They were probably already facilitating distance learnings. The education communities, the secondary education ministries across Europe, they had to move very quickly to get their scholars, primary and secondary education, to get their scholars online. And again, this was all made possible because of cloud services. Cloud services are key to any kind of delivery, any kind of competitive advantage. We need to, in a very agile way, be able to deploy solutions, and this does require using the cloud. Other collaboration tools, often accessible via marketplaces. Learning management. So a lot of the commercial learning management systems are only accessible via the cloud, if you look at solutions like Blackboard. But the open source solutions like Moodle, that has a very interesting business model, because it focuses on the functional redevelopment of the product, so it stays current and it can easily compete with commercial solutions. But it also is available through the Moodle cloud, where there are partnerships with commercial cloud providers, and this can be hosted and available as a software as a service. Student management, your enterprise suite. A lot of universities will still have really old PeopleSoft workloads for student administration that are probably no longer hosted on premise, that have probably been containerized and pushed out into the cloud. But a lot of the universities are going to be moving towards real multi-tenant software as a service. Workday is a really good example. They have a financial product, they have a human capital product. Their student product is available in the United States, and it will soon be available in Europe. And you will find universities migrating across to this model really quickly, cloud-based. And then a lot of these products have built-in learning assessments. And then if you have a look at the research-specific workloads, already researchers in Europe are using cloud-based data and cloud-based technologies. Earth observation, the Copernicus data comes down from the Sentinel satellites onto the DIaaS platforms. These have a commercial component in hosting, but this data is quickly abstracted onto commercial platforms like Cloud Sigma, which is a European platform, onto AWS for consumption and really economic consumption by the research community of this data. Physical sciences, the CERN community, the Helix Nebula Science Cloud is also has a lot of collaboration with commercial cloud platforms, and so on and so forth. A lot of the research disciplines are using commodity commercial cloud at scale already. If you look at so the OCRE project has run a few early funding calls, and the funding call for cloud services attracted about 35 project proposals from the institutes across Europe. And then we ran one for Earth observation services, and this attracted another 25 odd projects. And putting a proposal together was quite an onerous task. So this is not something that was easy. The projects had to be kicking off in early 2021. They had to be consuming these digital services in a way that they could clearly demonstrate the benefits of the service within the first 3 quarters of 2021, so that the OCRE project could start working with these research projects and developing really interesting case studies. But just here's a subset of the projects that were proposed. And you see that they span many science disciplines. They look for a huge amount of CPU. So a lot of it is looking for CPU, GPU, but they're also looking to use very specific machine learning, artificial intelligence platforms that have kind of predefined sets of algorithms that would be used in this research. And that's also one of the intentions of the OCRE project, is to help researchers commercialize their solutions on these platforms, so that the solutions can be reused in a way that is competitive and very supportive of research. If you have a look at the countries that these proposals came from, you'll see that they are predominantly in Western Europe, but subsequent calls will be more focused. But I think the greatest number of applications came from Italy, which is really interesting. So, for you as NRENs, understand that your communities are looking to consume commercial cloud services in a very big way. I mentioned GAIA-X here. You'll see in the middle, there's the GAIA-X logo, because the OCRE project is working closely with GAIA-X. GAIA-X is focused on the development of a European hyperscale environment and community. And we're looking at OCRE to select some of our European suppliers of services, so not necessarily the European resellers of the existing hyperscale platforms, but some of the European platforms, to help develop that economy on behalf of the European Commission. This is something they feel very strongly about in terms of data sovereignty in Europe. So if I move on and talk about the OCRE IaaS Plus tender, and it's IaaS Plus because it goes beyond just commodity cloud, compute and storage, into some of the platform and software as a service offerings. It was published on TED on the 15th of April 2020. It was closed on the 23rd of June. Because of COVID and requests from the market, we kept it extended until the 23rd of June. It was lot-based. So we actually ran frameworks in each of the 40 countries. And we have one supplier of each platform in each country. And that includes resellers of the hyperscale platforms of Microsoft, of Amazon, Azure, Amazon, Google, Oracle, IBM. We have one reseller, a single reseller of each of those platforms in each country. So the competition amongst the resellers of any one platform has been done. It's done and dusted. The institutes don't have to re-engage in that competition. They essentially have one supplier to go to for Azure services, for example. The market responded with 1,100 bids across the 40 participating countries. There was a huge effort by the procurement team to actually get all of those bids scored and awarded. 37 platforms are represented. There is a minimum of 9 platforms per country, so probably 4 or 5 of those really big platforms that I mentioned, plus a handful of other European-based platforms to give your communities a lot of choice and a lot of option. And then a maximum of 17 platforms in some of the larger Western European countries. So that's a huge amount of choice because that's 12 European or local platforms on top of the normal hyperscale resellers. So really, really interesting, a lot of hard work, but we are very, very excited by the outcomes. If you have a look at the framework, we ensure compliance in terms of the platforms that are available for use by the research and education community in Europe. Each and every one of these platforms will make themselves available for a standardized workload that CERN will run to test the platform. All the suppliers, by virtue of the fact that they operate in Europe, are bound by GDPR regulations. And all of them provide in-country support and call-off. And the call-offs run according to the laws of your country. The networks, GÉANT is looking at each of these 37 platforms to see where we need to look at new peering points to provide, continued service between your networks and these cloud platforms, these data centers. There are data ingress and egress waivers in place. That was one of the ways in which the platforms competed for a place on OCRE. GÉANT makes some of the Cloud Interconnect, Express Route, Direct Connect licensing available. And we're looking to see what we need to do in order to extend those services to all of the platforms that provide such a service. In terms of trust and identity, all of the platforms support SAML2 or OIDC protocol. And the GÉANT Trust and Identity team is developing a cloud gateway based on the GÉANT Federation. So that is underway, and that will be tested using the HN Cloud test bed when we test these platforms. Community support, each of the resellers, the suppliers, the platforms have promised to give 3 annual workshops in each of the countries. Some of these webinars may be run kind of centrally, but we will make sure that there is support for local language, etc. There is additional discounting, and that was another one of the scoring criteria, competitive criteria. And then we will be transitioning the framework contracts, as I said, to the GÉANT, the GN43 Work Package 4 and the GÉANT contract management group. And Jakob will talk a little bit more about that. All right, so what we have done is, as each of the suppliers have signed their framework contract, we have listed them on the OCRE Catalogue. And the OCRE Catalogue has been developed in a way that each of the NRENs and GÉANT, as they prepare their own catalogues that are not branded OCRE, that are actually branded according to the GÉANT community and the NREN, they can actually consume APIs to develop their own catalogs on their own cloud websites. But just to demonstrate the OCRE catalog, if you go onto the OCRE site and you click on the OCRE catalog button, which is yellow and off to the right, you get presented with a map of Europe, and each of the participating countries are represented. Sorry, just let me go back one there. If you hover over your country and you click it, you will get the country-based catalog, and the NREN will be represented here. Now, if I can ask each of you NRENs to just have a look at the way you represented here, to have a look at the logo and branding that we've used. If you have a specific cloud website or landing page that you would like us to use, please give us that information, and also make sure that we do have your cloud manager email addresses, and hopefully that's a generic email address that goes to a number of your cloud resources. And then also, if you wouldn't mind just reviewing the text that describes who you are and how you operate in terms of cloud, that would be really useful. And then below that, we have all of the suppliers listed. And you'll see this, if you refresh the browser, this will change in terms of the order of appearance, and that was the fairest way of making sure that everybody is represented in a similar way. But if you look, for example, at Rackspace, the reseller for AWS in Germany, and you look at their site, a lot of these suppliers have developed an OCRE-specific landing page on their site, which gives the community information about OCRE. It talks a little bit about what it is, the benefits, and how to actually engage with your local representative. You know, it's possibly through the NREN, but that really depends on the NREN's role and how much the NREN wants to be involved in this process. So I'm going to hand over to Jakob at this point to talk a little bit about the support for the NRENs. And then if you wouldn't mind just capturing your questions in the chat, Darko is going to facilitate the questions at the end, but it might be easier to do if your questions are all in the chat and we can answer them in a kind of an organized way and not try and work out who put their hand up first. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Jakob. We're available for any questions. Please reach out to the OCRE team or to the GÉANT contract management team for any further information. I've seen a lot of questions coming through from the NRENs already, where they are being contacted by suppliers or contacted by institutes. There are a number of institutes that are already consuming via call-offs off of this framework. So please be prepared for to support the institutes. This provides a huge amount of opportunity, I think, for this community. And with that, I hand over to Jakob.
Yes, thanks very much, Dave. Let me just say what a pleasure it is to see all of you here present today. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your attention. Just about myself, very briefly, Dave mentioned I'm a part of the OCRE tender team, and I'm interfacing with the NREN community. I also have the honor of being part of the GÉANT project and the work package 4, which Maria heads up here. And I work with the cloud adoption support task there. Darko is also present here. And we've had a lot of experience, learned a lot of things over the last 4 years with the previous framework. But also, I am one of the responsible cloud service managers at DFN in Germany. So I see the other end of the equation here also. I'm in the same boat with you representatives of the NREN community here in what this framework can mean for us as NRENs and for our community and for the institutions that we represent. So these frameworks, this IaaS Plus procurement activity that the OCRE project has completed now, it delivers a catalog of a selection of different services for different needs. We have the leading European cloud providers in the framework. We have boutique specialist cloud providers from Europe for several different applications, especially ones focused on data protection and GDPR issues. And we can present a widened selection of international leading hyperscale cloud providers that fill any kinds of performance or cutting edge technology needs that you or your institutions might have. But at the same time, these frameworks are not just valuable in creating the opportunity to buy cloud services for lots of money. They are also a tool for us as NRENs to bring the communications with our institutions up to a new level. We see very strong indications across Europe that demand for these leading cloud services at universities, at research centers is there, and it's growing. This is not just for research applications, but as we heard, for campus applications and for central IT applications. This demand is not always being met by central IT at institutions, which are our natural partners. So we see our partners at institutions in a situation where things are being asked of them, solutions are being asked of them, and they're increasingly not able to meet that demand with an on-premise only approach. And we hate to leave our partners in a bad spot, in a difficult position. So the availability of these cloud frameworks are also a really valuable tool for us as NRENs to do something valuable for our partners at institutions, which is mostly the central IT and compute services, and thereby helping them become more valuable and remain valuable partners with their constituents at the institutions, as diverse as they may be. So I have experienced as a cloud manager that just the availability of these frameworks has been a very valuable tool to start and nurture national communities around cloud applications, about several different aspects of procuring, using, legal aspects around cloud services, and to make the NREN become a valuable and trusted partner in a new field beyond the networking and technology building blocks that many of us as NRENs have been focusing on in the past. Some NRENs are even putting themselves in a position to procure the cloud services centrally on behalf of all their institutions, and thereby being able to give their institutions even more value. But simply being involved in contributing to a national conversation about digitalization at universities, at research, contributing information about webinars, about funding calls, makes the NREN be a more valuable member of the community, and bringing a positive conversation to the community. I think we can move to the next slide. Thanks. So what is the OCRE and the GÉANT community doing for NRENs to make these frameworks usable, and to put the NRENs in the position to actually have access to these potential benefits that I just outlined? So the OCRE project, obviously, as we heard, conducted the Pan-European Procurement Project and brought that to a fine close by providing the framework contracts in each of the 40 countries with this very attractive range of service providers. So the framework contracts, apart from a few very small cases at the edge that still need a little bit of discussion. The framework contracts are basically done and are available. And the OCRE project also developed and is maintaining the OCRE Cloud Catalogue that Dave just provided an overview. I really urge you all to take a look at that, because it's an extremely valuable source of information, but also contact points towards the suppliers, but also towards you as an NREN and towards your cloud specialists that institutions can use to get in touch with you. And then you have this ongoing conversation and the value that that provides. But this is now also the point where the OCRE project hands all of this material over, and the maintenance of the community conversation around clouds, the focus there is shifting to the GÉANT project. As we already heard, there's a dedicated work package. I'll go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. We have a very valuable NREN cloud manager community, which we've been nurturing now for many years, and this is growing more and more valuable. We have established communications channels, and we invite representatives from those NRENs that have not previously been part of the framework to join in there and to bring their questions, to bring their perspective to the discussion. This is an incredibly valuable wisdom of the crowd's resource there. And we highly encourage everyone to be a part of that and to make it more valuable. And of course, GÉANT as a company, as the main driver and the main active party in the OCRE project procurement activity, contributed a lot of personnel time, but also very specific expertise to this activity. And the whole activity still continues to benefit from the marketing and communications resources that GÉANT makes available, such as this Infoshare series, but by no means limited to that. So next slide, please. Thank you. Just as an overview, you probably know this at least as well as I do, that the GÉANT project has the work package 4 on digital services. And among the 4 tasks, technically 5 tasks, if you management task 0, we have 2 that are extremely relevant to the maintenance of the cloud conversation and the organization of these cloud activities here. And that's task 1, contract management under Garvin McFeely, has been doing a huge amount of work, a very, very valuable work, interfacing with the suppliers, managing the contracts, clarifying legal issues, but also making the information from the procurement, from the tenders available in a consumable format for those wanting to inform themselves about the bids and to get hold of the framework contracts. And then at the other end, we have the task number 4, which is home to the cloud adoption support activity, which is Darko Paric, also present here today. And that is the home of the NREN Cloud Manager community, but also maintains information stores, frequently asked questions, support material and expertise about these cloud services, about the frameworks, and about how NRENs can make best use of those. So in this cloud of resources around the Cloud Manager community, we have several different aspects that are designed and were built to benefit the NRENs to make use of these cloud frameworks in order to reap the benefits and to help your own institutions reap the benefits of these digital cloud services. And I encourage every one of you to make sure that your NREN is well represented in the Cloud Manager community, in the Cloud Forum video conference that happens every 2 weeks, in the mailing list, and that actively contributes questions, even if you don't have the answers yourself. Even that is valuable already. So to close there, thanks very much for your attention, and we look forward to your questions and any hints that we can get from you, how we can better support you in cloud adoption. Thank you.
Darko, would you like to pick up here?
Hello. Sorry, I didn't hear you what you asked, Dave.
So we're just going to look at the questions in the chat.
Yes, I sent those questions to you in email. So all questions you have in your mailbox.
Okay, I am sharing my screen. So just
You found it?
I did.
Excellent.
Okay, so question for David. OCRE replaces the GÉANT 2016 framework contract. How many cloud providers are still the same? The question, how sustainable are the providers over time to avoid to move from one cloud provider to another each time there's a new framework contract, or is this just a detail? So my understanding of this, and I'm not sure if Jakob wants to chip in, but if an institute signs a call-off agreement with a provider at any point during the life of the framework, that the call-off is the same as a call-off that might have been signed, just between an institute and a supplier anyway, and will run for the duration of the call-off. And I see Garvin's got his hand up there, and he can maybe pick this up from me.
Yeah, no problem, Dave. So let's say you had an Azure subscription with a provider in the previous framework. Whether there's a change in provider to a new provider or not, you take out a new subscription, you sign your call off, you take out a new enrollment, and then the migration process of your workloads is non-invasive. It's just a billing, it's where the billing points to changes from your old subscription to your new subscription. It's very painless. I've been through our transition for our Azure consumption from the old to the new. It was really, really painless. I hope that answers your question.
Basically, to summarize, we've had very few suppliers fall away that were under the previous framework and no longer are in terms of the cloud platform. Sometimes the reselling company for the American hyperscalers has changed in your country, but that's just a contract renewal. The technical infrastructure in, say, the Azure or the Amazon cloud can stay the same. So the cost of switching an Amazon reseller is some paperwork, but that's all. And I don't know of a case of any institution who consumed services under the old framework who now had to find a new cloud platform.
And also to note, in the previous framework, we had sort of mid-20, 25 or 29 framework contracts. When we're finished all of the signing process, we'll have 473. So the range of platforms available to in each and every country has dramatically increased from the previous framework.
Okay, I'm not sure. Are there any other questions? Are there any other hands raised?
I'll put mine down. Good. So maybe the next question we can grab just very quickly is the question how we did the assessment between US hyperscalers and local European cloud providers. And the easy answer to that is we didn't differentiate. We didn't exclude one among the other. What we may do was ensure that each of the American hyperscalers was only represented by one reseller in country. But in addition to that, the European providers that represent themselves, they got a framework in every country where they qualified for the minimum criteria. So they're all available to you.
Right. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Okay. Shall I just go down the list in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, good. The question was, Dirk asked whether we think we've negotiated the absolute best conditions with the different hyperscalers. Dave or Garvin, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, certainly. If you look across the full breadth of the framework, the questions that we asked them, and the concessions that we've received from all of those providers, whether they're the hyperscale providers or indeed, in-country providers or niche operators. The fact that we went out representing 40 countries, 10,000 plus HEIs, and and the entire aggregate research and education market meant that we got serious attention from all of those hyperscale providers, and from the niche providers too. So in practical terms, I can't see how you would get a better outcome than we have achieved by running this framework. Oh, sorry, if it was just one footnote, for example, obviously I'm not going to say which provider, but for a lot of the say the concessions, the discount points we've got from these large providers, if you were a commercial entity, you would need to be consuming millions and millions and millions of euros per annum to get anywhere near the sort of concessions that we have. But I think you'd still struggle.
Yeah, if I might add to that, I think, I mean, a European procurement is not a negotiation, right? And if we would have had a European procurement with the outcome a single supplier, that may be a better offer for that single supplier, but we all know that there is not a single solution which fits the needs best of all 10,000 institutions. We need choice. And we are not at a stage where we're able to commit to spending millions of euros of each of these suppliers in order to get even better deals. So I totally agree with Garvin with where we came from, with how we engage in the market, but without any hard commitment, this is the best deal you can get.
Yeah, so I see there's a question from Yari about the service catalog. And we don't actually have a service catalog by service type. And that's a really good question because there are so many different services that are kind of implied. For example, I said I was actually on an Azure webinar earlier, and the services that they offer through OCRE is, the list of services is endless. I mean, there's a lot, and it's actually quite a lot to digest and understand. So I'm not sure in terms of, Garvin, you may be able to answer this, but in terms of making your community aware of exactly what's on offer besides the standardized kind of compute, storage, commodity type services, how would you go about that? Okay, so we have been, shall we say, studying the maturing cloud market in Europe over the past 5-6 years. It is not possible or practical to try and do a side-by-side comparison between the range of cloud services and how services within each cloud operator is built, operated, or billed. Right? You'll wreck your head if you try and figure out, well, a virtual machine of this capacity in provider A or B with this amount of storage and this type of workload, with a firewall in front of it, with a load balancer, with a this, with a that, you'll end up tearing your hair out. My hair used to be this white, right? And each of these tenders that we do, it seems to get wider. But the size of the service portfolio for each provider is wildly different. If you look at, say, for example, the AWS catalog, they have about 900,000 SKUs. They have 900,000 different products you can buy from them. Azure has around 300,000.
Some of the niche players have 100, but the 100 might be the best fit. That niche player might be the best fit for you for your workload. As a rule of thumb, if you have a Microsoft server with Microsoft SQL database workload to run, say a classic MIS workload, probably the cheapest way that you can license that is to use some of the Azure hybrid use benefits, the campus use rights that you get to bring to cloud. That can make a dramatic difference to the cost of licensing it. And that might be the cheapest workload, the cheapest way to operate that particular workload. But if you're a researcher and you want to do some funky AI, or you want to do something, there's a natural home for each of these things, and you need to try and find that. Sorry for rambling a bit, but there is no side-by-side comparator possible. It's just there lies madness.
And I think it is just understanding that the scope and scale of this. If you are looking for managed services at security sentinel across a hybrid landscape, I mean, if you're looking for anything, I think the OCRE working out whether or not it is available through the OCRE framework somehow is a really good thing to do, because there's a lot here, but it would be very difficult to catalog it by service type.
I think, Dave, just, like Michelle mentioned a couple of minutes ago, one size does not fit all. But I think that but in totality, our framework can fit everything.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I don't believe there's a workload that anybody has that can't find a home somewhere in the portfolio of providers that's available in each country.
I see a hand up now from Antoni.
Yes. Yes, I have one question regarding to the early adopters grants that you announced at the beginning. We ourselves have one at Alba Synchrotron in Barcelona, and we are wondering if we need to sign first the frameworks with the different providers before being able to start the project, or there is a special path for starting these projects.
Hey, maybe I can just step in there, unless Jan is in the line somewhere, because I'm also assisting in the funding project. So OCRE will do, together with GÉANT, a lot of hand-holding with those projects to assist and offload a lot of the work for the procurement, and will definitely help you end up with one of these call-off agreements to the framework, which you can then keep using with your own funds.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? As I said, and as Jakob mentioned, this does provide a huge opportunity for, I think, the NREN to adjust their strategy in terms of supporting the institutes. And I'm really hoping that we actually see in for example, the new GÉANT strategy, in the TNC 21, in the format and agenda, and in your own NREN strategies and your own NREN conferences. I hope we see, a real commitment to the supporting of digital services, because a lot of the institutes are starting to consume bandwidth from the NREN, but from some of the commercial networks. They are starting to deploy software-defined wide area networking that allows them to prioritize bandwidth in terms of their strategic workloads. Their strategic workloads will be cloud-based, because this enables them to draw as much information in terms of your business intelligence, the decisions you're making that ensure that you have competitive advantage. And so I really think it is important to sit back and kind of think a little bit about strategy, and review your strategy and commit resources where possible to supporting this framework. Any comments from anybody else?
Yeah, maybe just from me briefly, even if you don't hear loud and clear demand from your institutions at the moment about these digital cloud services, I can only encourage you to get into conversations in your community and try and find out what the stakeholders of your stakeholders would need and maybe are or maybe not be telling them. In certain situations, we see a communications disconnect between the research community's central IT and then the NREN. Be aware of that and try and start and maintain a constructive communications in your community about digital services in general. And then you have an answer here if questions do come. Sorry, Dirk, you had a hand up. I might have interrupted you, sorry.
Yes, Dirk Haaks from Belnet, Belgium. It's not really a question, it's just congratulations to the whole team that has put this in place. I'm really impressed, and I think this is really an added value for the constituency in Belgium within the research and education space, and I guess it's the same for all NRENs in Europe, so congratulations, nice work.
Thank you very much. Very, very good to hear. I know that your colleagues are engaged in the community. Again, if you want access to the framework documents, access to more information about the tender, experiences of others, how to make these available to your institutions, get in contact with Work Package 4, Task 4, the Cloud Manager mailing list, or just clouds@géant.org. That is the central help desk email address if you have questions. And from there, we can help you find the right connections.
And Jakob, we have one question in chat. So Roberto.
Oh yes, about the funding. Hi Roberta, yes. Thanks for that question. The second funding round was originally scheduled to start around now. We're just in the process of communicating this out, but the question is here now. So I'll just let you know that the first round of funding towards the end of this year, last year, for the cloud compute services was so successful that we had more projects qualify than we originally expected. And together with the expert advisory board, we were recommended to have a slight shift in funding strategy for the next round to focus more on specific projects at a larger scale. So we can probably consider the planning that was announced a while ago as currently on ice, and we're working as hard as we can to very quickly communicate how things will move on from here with that funding. Thanks.
Michelle has his hand up.
Yes.
Yeah. Going back to the tender, I think what is important and what may give you some additional value is the fact that there were no complaints by any of the bidders. So not only the ones who won, but also the ones who didn't won. There were no complaints during the procurement and or the contracting or afterwards. I mean, that demonstrates that they understood our role, why we did it. That could have been questioned, so many countries, so many institutions, and demonstrated that we were able to convince with all the communications before we went to tender how it would go, and that we tried really to incorporate all the needs and all the abilities of the suppliers. So that is something which may be of value to as well to understand.
Thanks, Michelle.
And just to add on to that, Michelle's point there, every single provider has signed exactly the same framework contract. They all have exactly the same call off. There is no tweaking for anybody. So when you're looking at the framework documentation or the call off documentation, every single provider has signed the same framework agreement. That's another, I suppose, added value, that there's no specials or derogations for anybody. They've all signed the same thing.
Thanks, Garvin. Right, any other comments, any other questions? Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present on that this afternoon. I think thank you to the GÉANT Partner Relations team and the community outreach for this time. I think it has been a pleasure to talk about OCRE. It is something we like talking about. And I think it's because we do recognize the opportunities for the community. So please reach out.
We're really excited to bring this to you. And if you have any questions that might be keeping you from looking into this closer, or that might make you hesitate, please get in touch. We have great experiences across the community that can help you get going and hopefully add value to your community. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jakob. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.